So very recently we have heard from the defence of Richard Allen concerning the recently unsealed PCA document and how it relates to the potential innocence of their client. In this video I'm going to narrate this document for you and also interject in places to offer my own thoughts and theories. As Richard Allen's attorneys, we have received multiple requests from local and national media for interviews and comment since the unsealing of the probable cause affidavit. It would be virtually impossible to comply with these requests and continue to focus on the merits of Rick's defence. Therefore, we offer up these thoughts. We do not want to try this case in the media, and we intend to adhere to the Indiana rules of professional conduct that provide guidance on pre-trial publicity. However, the police and prosecutor's office have conducted many press conferences over the 5+ years of this investigation and following our client's arrest. On the other hand, Richard's ability to assert his innocence has been reduced to only one short post-hearing press conference. Accordingly, we feel it appropriate, necessary and within the bounds of our rules of professional conduct to make a few comments concerning the probable cause affidavit and Richard's innocence. Richard is a 50-year-old man who has never been arrested nor accused of any crime in his entire life. He is innocent and completely confused as to why he is being charged with these crimes. The police did not contact Richard after Libby German and Abby Williams went missing. Rather, Richard contacted the police and voluntarily discussed being on the trail that day. Like many people in Delphi, Richard wanted to help any way he could. Richard contacted the police to let them know that he had walked on the trail that day, as he often did. Without Richard coming forward, the police probably would not have had any way of knowing that he was on the trail that day. Okay, so let's just cut in here briefly and I'll share my thoughts on what we've just listened to there. Now, quite naturally, the defence are going to come forward at this point in time and say, look, Richard Allen was a courteous, helpful individual. He came forward to the police at the earliest possible opportunity, and really this individual just wanted to help. He just wanted the girls to return home safely. That is the impression they're going to put out there. What we need to separate, however, is did Richard Allen feel that he needed to come forward? And I think that's the most important thing here. How did Richard Allen perceive this in his mind? Now, we know from the probable cause affidavit that he was seen. He was seen by multiple individuals on the trail that day. So in Richard Allen's mind, if he is indeed guilty of these murders, he's thinking to himself, okay, this didn't quite go as I had planned it. I was hoping to go there, find my victims, and kill them without being seen and leave the scene without any witnesses. But this clearly didn't happen, did it? He was seen by at least 3 juvenile females on the trail, and even more interestingly, he was seen by a passing motorist leaving the crime scene. Now, what I pick up upon regarding her eyewitness account is that she claims that she sees an individual, a male individual, who is both bloody and muddy. Now, if this is indeed Richard Allen fleeing the crime scene that this lady witnesses as she drives past, then she must have been fairly close to Richard Allen to make that assertion. Now, the reason that I say that is because when we take a look at what she has stated here, the male subject was wearing a blue-coloured jacket and blue jeans and was muddy and bloody. Now, if you think about the colours involved here, mud on blue, blood on blue, she must have been really close to him to be able to make that assertion. It's not like she's 50, 60, 70 feet away. He's wearing a white t-shirt, white bottoms. It's fairly evident that there's blood and mud on this individual. We're talking about a sort of mid-colour blue top and light-coloured jeans. But even still, mud and blood, you would have to be incredibly close to that person to be able to identify both of those substances on the colour blue. Now, equally, some people may say, well, maybe he had blood on his face, on his arms, on his hands. Is that what this lady saw? But again, you would need to be fairly close to an individual to be able to ascertain those two substances in general, mud and blood. You know, we're not talking about someone who was parked up stationary, who noticed something odd and thought, oh, hang on a minute, what's going on here? Keeping a close look at an individual. We're talking about someone who was a passing motorist. So every indicator that I get from her eyewitness account is that this was a fairly close encounter here with Richard Allen. And if this is indeed the case, put yourself back in the mind of Richard Allen for one moment. We don't just have the 3 juvenile females and other individuals who saw Richard Allen on the trail that day, but we also have this close encounter with a passing motorist. I think what is also worth remembering is that it's not completely uncommon for perpetrators of murder to actually insert themselves into investigations, and there can be a multitude of reasons for this, whether they just wish to gain knowledge on how the investigation is going, or whether they just want to appear innocent. Oh, look, I've come forward, I've given you this information, I've put myself there that day. There's a multitude of reasons why an individual would have done this. Anyway, let's continue on with the following statement. Richard volunteered to meet with a conservation officer outside of the local grocery store to offer up details of his trip to the trail on the day in question. Richard tried to assist with the investigation and told the police that he did recall seeing 3 younger girls on the trail that day. His contact with the girls was brief and of little significance. Richard does not recall if this interaction with the conservation officer was tape recorded, but believes that the conservation officer scribbled notes on a notepad as Richard spoke to him. Okay, so let's just interject here very briefly. Now, when I put myself in the position of Richard Allen, assuming he is guilty for one moment, this is the best possible outcome for him here. He's not in some interview room being grilled, question after question. This is very casual, very out in the open. It's a public place. This man's taking brief details down on a notepad potentially. So this is the best possible outcome here for Richard Allen. What I am quite intrigued about though is that we haven't heard any questioning regarding the man on the bridge. Did Richard Allen admit to being the man on the bridge? I would imagine that he hasn't. So how has he accounted for that? We've got an individual who is wearing a blue jacket, blue jeans. We have Richard Allen who has said, I was on the trail that day wearing a blue jacket, blue jeans, and I had a hoodie under my jacket. Have the police actually said to him, are you the man on the bridge? We don't actually have that answer, do we? Which I do find quite interesting. So let's now continue on with the statements here. After Richard shared his information with law enforcement officials, he went back to his job at the local CVS and didn't hear from the police for more than 5 years. The next time Richard heard from the police was in October 2022. This was approximately 2 weeks before a contested sheriff's election and within days of a federal lawsuit filed against the Carroll County Sheriff's Office by its former second-in-command, Michael Thomas. In the lawsuit, Thomas claims that he, Thomas, quote, had made suggestions and offered assistance in the investigation of a high-profile child homicide investigation. But those suggestions and offers were rejected by the sheriff. Thomas further claimed that the sheriff and others in the department feared the disagreements with Thomas would become publicised as a result of the political campaign for sheriff. Thomas claims in the suit that he was ultimately demoted and replaced by Tony Liggett, who later that year won the 2022 election for sheriff. Furthermore, Thomas claims he was also removed from high-profile cases. Richard was ultimately arrested on or about October 28, 2022. In the 5+ years since Richard volunteered to provide information to the police, Richard did not get rid of his vehicle or his guns and did not throw out his clothing. He did not alter his appearance. He did not relocate himself to another community. He did what any innocent man would do and continued with his normal routine. Okay, so a few interesting little snippets there in that paragraph. He has kept hold of the vehicle, the guns, and did not throw out his clothing. Now we can't be sure, can we, regarding the clothing, because he could have gone out and bought a different jacket, an identical jacket to the one that he was wearing that day, and he could have disposed of the one that he wore on the bridge. That is obviously assuming Richard Allen's guilt here for one moment. But they're obviously going to say this, aren't they? They're going to say that, look, this is an innocent man. This person kept hold of his car, he kept hold of the gun, he kept hold of the clothing, he continued working a normal job. You could say, yes, those are the traits of an innocent man. Or equally, you could say, those are the traits of an absolute moron. I mean, it's up to you which side of the fence that you fall on regarding those two, potential suggestions. But just because he's kept all of these items, does it really mean that he is an innocent man? To me, no, obviously it doesn't. I do find this really strange, though, the fact that he's gone to this conservation officer, he's given some details, he's gone back home, he's kept hold of this gun, he's kept hold of the car. I think some people have suggested recently that Richard Allen was a brazen individual, someone who actually wanted to be caught. That's the reason he went forward or came forward to the police, because he wanted to be caught for this crime. Now, this ultimately depends on how you view this. Either you believe Richard Allen has inserted himself into this investigation, he's gone to this conservation officer because he likes the spotlight, he loves to revel in the fact that he has committed this crime, but he's sort of hoodwinking everybody. He's pulling the wool over everybody's eyes, so to speak. Either you fall on that side of the fence, or you believe, actually, he was seen by a certain amount of individuals that day, on the trail, even on the bridge itself, and also fleeing the crime scene. So is that just a panic response? He wants to tell the police that he was there because all of these people have actually seen him. They're going to be coming forward and saying, look, I saw this man covered in blood, covered in mud, I was driving my car, and it's simply a reaction out of fear from Richard Allen, in that he has called the police and said, look, I was there, I didn't see the girls. It all depends on how you view it. My own personal opinion is that this is an individual who didn't carry out this crime particularly well. Maybe the actual murders themselves were done in a clean and efficient manner, in that he didn't leave his DNA behind, but he hasn't really parked in the optimal spot to commit this crime. He's had to walk a fair distance back to his car. He hasn't decided to keep close to the tree line, most likely, to avoid passing motorists. He's been seen by other individuals prior to these murders being committed. So there's a lot of mistakes here. And he's also even potentially kept hold of the gun in which he used to subdue both Abigail and Liberty. Let's now continue on with the statement here. The probable cause affidavit seems to suggest that a single magic bullet is proof of Richard's guilt. It is a bit premature to engage in any detailed discussions regarding the veracity of this evidence until more discovery is received, but it is safe to say that the discipline of toolmark identification, ballistics, is anything but a science. The entire discipline has been under attack in courtrooms across this country as being unreliable and lacking any scientific validity. We anticipate a vigorous legal and factual challenge to any claims by the prosecution as to the reliability of its conclusions concerning the single magic bullet. Okay, so they're talking there about this unspent bullet that was found at the crime scene. As I said earlier in this video, I'm really interested if the police have actually said to Richard Allen, okay, so you're wearing blue jeans, blue jacket and a hoodie under your jacket. Are you this individual in the video here? We haven't heard that, have we? We haven't heard that neither confirmed nor denied. Now, as I said earlier, I can only imagine that if they have asked this question, that it was strongly denied. But what they're talking about here is the bullet that was found in between the two bodies of Liberty German and Abigail Williams. And clearly this is going to be a very, very hot topic of discussion during the trial. I don't believe personally that the prosecution are going to be hanging their hat necessarily on this unspent bullet. It's more of the totality of the evidence pointing at Richard Allen. The fact that we have this unspent bullet. We have independent witnesses who have stated that they see a man matching his description close to the crime scene, near the Monon High Bridge, or at least on the trails that day. The fact that Richard Allen himself has put himself there that day, even said that he was on the bridge on the day of the murders. It's going to be the totality of the evidence against Richard Allen which is his biggest issue here, not so much one smoking gun or an unspent bullet found between the two bodies. On Richard's behalf, we argue to have the PCA unsealed. Richard has nothing to hide. As importantly, we were hoping that we would receive tips that would assist us in proving up his innocence. Not surprisingly, we have been inundated with tips from a variety of sources, all of which will be vetted by our team. Although it is the burden of the prosecutor to prove Richard's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, The defence team looks forward to conducting its own investigation concerning Richard's innocence. We appreciate those that have reached out to support his cause. The prosecutor mentioned at the last hearing his belief that others may have been involved in the killing, yet there was no mention in the PCA about a second suspect involved in the killing. The defence is confused by such discrepancies in the investigation and will be in a better position to respond as more discovery is received. Richard Allen owned a Ford Focus in February of 2017. His Ford Focus is not in any way similar to the distinctive look of the PT Cruiser or smart car that was described by the witnesses. It seems that the CCSD is trying to bend facts to fit their narrative. At this point in time, we have received very limited information about this case and look forward to having something more to view than that which was offered up in the sparse PCA. Okay, so now we reach the discussion regarding the vehicles. I think this is going to be a very, very hotly debated topic in the court because I have to agree with them here. A Ford Focus, to me personally, doesn't look anything like a PT Cruiser. A PT Cruiser is a very distinctive car, both back and front, and it certainly does not resemble a smart car, which is quite clearly far too small to be a Ford Focus. So I don't see the parallels here between a Ford Focus, a PT Cruiser and a smart car. And as I say, I think this will be a hotly debated topic if and when this case goes to trial. So let's finish off with the statement here. Moving forward, it is our intent to scrutinise the discovery as it is received and give the necessary attention to the volumes of tips that we are receiving. To the extent we continue to discover information that points to Richard's innocence, we will offer up this information to the public so long as we are not prohibited from doing so as a result of the recent request by the prosecutor for a gag order or by the Indiana Rules of Professional Conduct. Brad Rosie. Spelt Rosie, but apparently pronounced Rosie. Okay, so let me know your own thoughts and theories and feelings regarding this recently released statement from the defence. And as always, many thanks for joining me for this particular video. If you enjoyed it, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel below. And I look forward to seeing you all again for the next one. Take care. Cheers.